More on this topic, I'm joined by Jonathan Broder. He's a senior writer for Newsweek covering national security. He's also a former foreign correspondent for the Middle East, South Asia and China. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start with the biggest takeaways from President Xi's speech. What stood out to you?
Well, what stood out to me was the $20 billion in loans that China will be giving to the Arab world. And also, as you mentioned, $105, $106 million that they're giving to Palestine and several Arab countries. What this indicates to me is that China is basically increasing its commitment and its involvement in the Middle East. China has traditionally really not been that involved in the Middle East. It basically just bought a lot of oil from the Middle East, but it really didn't get involved in the politics or the geopolitics of the Middle East. And now it seems through this gesture and through other gestures, which we can talk about, China is upping its profile in the Middle East.
And we've certainly seen that with the Belt and Road. And we know that President Xi said that China and Arab states must synergize our development strategies in pursuit of our respective dream of rejuvenation. So what do closer Sino-Arab ties mean, not just for China, but for Arab countries as well?
Well, what it means is that there will be more Chinese investment in these countries. You mentioned the Belt and Road strategy. This is very, very, very important, and it goes right through the Middle East. So what you're seeing is China is stepping up its security profile in the Middle East. It's building a Navy base in Djibouti, which is right on the Horn of Africa, which controls traffic going up through the Suez Canal. China is also has good relations with, this is another thing about that makes this very interesting. China, compared to the other two superpowers, Russia and the United States, is the only superpower that has good relations with all sides in the Middle East, with the Israelis and the Arabs, with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Those are the two main conflicts in the Middle East. China has good relations with both. It is, for example, if Djibouti is controlling the access to the Suez Canal from the south, China is working with Israel to build a railroad from the port of Eilat, which is on the Red Sea,
right,
up to the Mediterranean, just in case the Suez Canal gets closed. So they have another way to get up there.
So being that they now have more involvement with the Belt and Road and this bigger commitment also in the region, what would you say are the biggest concrete outcomes of the meeting?
Well, as I said, the $20 billion and the aid are an indication that China is stepping up its profile. It remains to be seen. I mean, this is a gamble on China's part. For example, to be on both sides of the conflict between the Cold War, if you will, between Saudi Arabia and Iran is a dangerous position to be in. For example, if there was a war between those two, China would be hurt simply because most of its oil comes from those two.
And as we look at oil, we know that Saudi Arabia was China's second largest source of crude oil last year, but that's not all that the relationship centers on. So how would you characterize the current economic level of cooperation between China and Arab states?
It's mostly oil at the moment. I think one of the things that President Xi emphasized in his speech, he was urging the Arab world, diversify your economies. You can't just do oil. And part of the money that he is providing to them in the loans is to encourage them to develop renewable energy, nuclear power, other things like that. So he's nudging them in that direction.
Now, let's also talk about some of these economic reforms that Arab countries are making as they modernize their economies and also manage this relationship with oil and trying to wean themselves off so much of a dependence.
Well, the only country that's doing that right now is Saudi Arabia. They've got their 2030 Vision 2030 plan. And the idea there is to diversify the Saudi economy, which is totally based on oil and natural gas right now, and try to develop other things. Now, in the past, you've seen Saudi Arabia try to grow wheat. It grew wheat in the desert and exported it. Now, the price of growing that wheat because it required desalinated water, which is extremely expensive to desalinate, was astronomical. So, of course, the government subsidized it. We'll see. I mean, the ambitions of the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, are gigantic. And the question is how far he can go with this, how much he displaces the religious establishment as he lets women drive, for example, which is normal for us, but in Saudi Arabia it's not.
We'll certainly have to see if the rest of the region catches on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. Jonathan Broder there of Newsweek.